All right, everybody. I'm Logan Alec. I'm a CPA. This is my stimulus update for Friday, December 18th. We are still waiting for Congress to finish this deal, folks. It is Friday. This is the deadline for government funding. This is the last day of the 1 week stopgap measure that was passed a week ago to keep the government funded. With every minute that goes by, it looks like what House Majority Leader, number 2 Dem in the House, Steny Hoyer, said earlier this week might actually happen, namely Congress having to pass another stopgap measure, a mini continuing resolution to keep the government funded at existing levels for another few days so that our friends in Congress can knock out the finalities of this combined $1.4 trillion government funding omnibus / $900 billion stimulus bill that they're working on. The alternative, which number 2 Republican Senator John Thune suggested may happen, is that the government will shut down briefly over the weekend. Wild ride here, folks. A little bit of good news is that reportedly Mitch McConnell this morning said he's even more optimistic right now than he was last night about reaching a deal, though he said that there will probably be the need for another stopgap measure. I was hoping to hear from Pelosi at her weekly press conference this morning, tell you the latest on where her head is at right now, but apparently her press conference has been pushed back to this afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Before we get into the negotiations, let's just talk briefly about Trump. As I'm sure you've heard, the Washington Post yesterday afternoon reported that Donald Trump wanted to issue a statement yesterday calling for $2,000 stimulus checks, or at least $1,200 stimulus checks, and White House aides intervened to prevent him from doing so because they said, look, Trump, do you want to screw this up? Congress is working hard on this right now. Kind of close to a deal here. If you say something that makes it sound like you're going to veto anything without $2,000 or at least $1,200 stimulus checks, you might throw a lot of cold water on this thing. And this is really nothing new, right? There was talk of Trump wanting $2,000 stimulus checks reported by the Washington Post last Tuesday, right? When Pelosi and Mnuchin were negotiating with Trump, he would pop in every once in a while and say or tweet, I want big stimulus. I want bigger stimulus than the Dems. This is nothing new. Like I've said before, Trump is all but irrelevant at this point, even to his own party. From the Republican perspective, it is the Mitch McConnell show right now. Trump, the White House, Mnuchin, Kudlow, all those guys, they're out in 33 days, but Mitch will remain. He has the power going into his 36th year in the Senate. Look, folks, let's just do some basic math right now. This compromise bill they're working on is about $900 billion, and it includes $600 stimulus checks, right? And these $600 stimulus checks will cost roughly $150 billion. So just kind of extrapolating those numbers, and this is very back of the napkin, rough math here that doesn't take into account potentially differing income limitations and things like that, yada, 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 yada. But if $600 stimulus checks cost $150 billion, then proportionally, $2,000 stimulus checks would cost around $500 billion, half a trillion. That would balloon the cost of this package to roughly $1.25 trillion. That might not seem large compared to what Mnuchin was talking about before the election, but think about it, folks. As I've told you, we've heard reports that Republicans are trying to nickel and dime everything right now. We had the number 2 Republican Senator John Thune suggesting earlier this week that we make those who are eligible for the supercharged unemployment boost of $300 a week, which, by the way, Republicans want to shorten, by the way, from the 16 weeks in the bipartisan proposal to 12 or 13 or potentially only 10 weeks. Thune suggested that if somebody is eligible for unemployment, they shouldn't be eligible for stimulus checks. Thank God it sounds like Dems shot that idea down, but that's the mentality right now among GOP senators, nickel and diming everything. Just realistically speaking, they're not going to all of a sudden in the next few days be open to ballooning the cost of this bill from $900 billion to $1.25 trillion. Just not going to happen. 1,200 stimulus checks, that would still get it over the $1 trillion mark. I think that would be even distasteful to many Republicans, but 2,000, come on. I mean, Trump's talked this sort of thing up before. Let's not get too excited about him doing so again. All right, negotiations. In my videos over the past few days, I've told you what the remaining sticking points are. Republicans and Democrats still squabbling over various things. FEMA, live venue funding. Some Dems saying that Republicans are pushing too much for small business right now at the expense of unemployment. There's the issue of the Federal Reserve's emergency lending facilities. Republicans want to scale those back. And frankly, that's probably the biggest issue right now to getting a deal done. Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania said that these emergency lending facilities, that the Fed has that were implemented by the CARES Act could make the Fed more of a lender of first resorts rather than what it should be in his mind, a lender of last resort. He and other Republicans want to scale back the Fed's emergency lending powers, specifically as exercised through the lending facility set up by the CARES Act, such as the Main Street Lending Program. Democrats, however, see this move by Republicans as a move to decrease the power of the Federal Reserve to come in and stabilize the economy when need be. Democrats are claiming that Republicans aren't merely seeking to scale back the Fed to what it was before the coronavirus pandemic, but to actually reduce the authority of the Federal Reserve, the authority it had before the CARES Act was passed. This is even in light of Fed Chair Jerome Powell this week saying that as far as these emergency lending facilities go, after the crisis has passed, the Fed will put these emergency tools back in the box and not use them again. Nevertheless, Democrats are essentially claiming right now that a deal would have been reached at this point if Republicans hadn't raised this issue of scaling back the Fed's lending facilities. That's the Dems side of the story anyway. But even just looking at this from a nonpartisan perspective, yeah, I mean, the powers and lending capacity of the Federal Reserve, that's a pretty big issue, right? So this could very well be the thing that stalls a stimulus deal here. Other issues we talked about surround how the stimulus checks at the moment are reported to be planned for $600 per non-dependent, $600 per dependent, including adult dependents, also U.S. citizens who are married to those without a social security number, as well as their citizen children would be eligible for stimulus checks if they're otherwise eligible. That's the Marco Rubio plan. Told you about this yesterday. Obviously, Bernie and Josh Hawley are still pushing hard for $1,200 rather than $600. In fact, today, Josh Hawley is going to ask the Senate to vote on $1,200 stimulus checks. I have a feeling he will be shot down, unfortunately. Folks, I cannot stress this enough. Everything is still up in the air right now, okay? There are some new disagreements that were publicized yesterday. They were not quite substantial enough to convince me to make a dedicated video just for these developments, but let's go over them now. Let's start with the eviction moratorium. And Democrats and Republicans right now are fighting over whether or not the eviction moratorium should be extended if they're going to give rent relief to the people anyway. Democrats are obviously pushing for an eviction moratorium. The bipartisan proposal wanted to push it to January 31st, but the Senate Banking Chair, Republican Mike Crapo of Idaho, is saying that he's seeking to avoid the need for an eviction moratorium by approving rental assistance. He feels it's redundant. My take is, look, it's inevitable that some people are going to fall through the cracks with the rental relief, right? This is federal money being administered by the states and localities. Some states may not be the best at distributing the funds or the voucher program, whatever they're going to have. So I don't really see any harm in extending the eviction moratorium, at least for a little while states figure out how to administer the rent relief that is hopefully coming. That's my take. Feel free to disagree. Also, we have some news on unemployment. Republicans are reportedly seeking to exclude people receiving less than $100 a week in regular state unemployment benefits from qualifying for the extra $300 boost that they're open to. They're obviously taking a move here from Trump's playbook because that was the rule as well with Trump's unemployment memorandum. So Republicans are reportedly seeking to further cut funding for unemployment. This thing, we know that already they are seeking to slash the unemployment boost from the 16 weeks proposed by the bipartisan group, the Manchin-Romney proposal, to 12 or 13 weeks, right? Or even 10 weeks, maybe, in this compromise bill. Obviously, Democrats disagree with Republicans at this point. Democrats want more unemployment benefits for the people. Republicans have been trying to reduce the benefits in this new $900 billion compromise. All right, folks, that is my update for now. I hope Congress makes significant progress today because, frankly, yesterday we didn't really hear of any major breakthroughs. Hoping we hear something like a breakthrough today. Thank you so much for watching, folks, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.